Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh, and we have a good one for you today. This is Hidden History. It's the same concept, same format that you've come to know from, of course, our previous season, which was under a different name of Uprising. But I think we'd kind of decided to keep the same format, but expand a little bit with the title and call it Hidden History, because pretty much the goal for today is to, as it always is, just to go over some of the stories that don't get a lot of attention in our historical education at large. And today we have an interesting one. It comes courtesy of the Mob Museum here. So we're getting our sourcing information. This is about the Chicago outfit and John F. Kennedy in the 1960s. So a number of authors assert, based on claims by individuals who are linked in one way or another to organized crime in Chicago, that the Chicago mob, which is usually referred to as the outfit, was responsible for John F. Kennedy's election as president in 1960. It alleged that JFK's father, Joseph, met with the outfit boss, Sam Giancana, before the election and struck a deal. If Giancana made sure that Kennedy was elected, because, of course, in Illinois, it was a crucial swing state in that election, so he really needed the that vote there, very, very important there in Illinois, especially getting out the vote in Chicago, which Giancana could definitely do, whether illegally or legally. So if Giancana made sure Kennedy was elected, Kennedy in return would lay off organized crime when he was president. Supposedly, the outfit kept its end of the bargain, but was double-crossed by the Kennedys, who increased federal pressure on the outfit locally and the Cosa Nostra generally. In several versions of the story, the outfit retaliated by assassinating John and Robert Kennedy. And a lot of this, this is what a lot of people kind of, we touched on a little bit, of course, with the Kennedy assassination stuff that we did in the last season, but the thread that really is kind of being pulled here is the election of Kennedy. It's kind of like a three-way triangle of multiple effects. On one point, you have what's going on down in Cuba. You have the Kennedys on one point of the triangle, and then the mob on the other. And what's going on in Cuba is that the mob is obviously rapidly losing access to the casino business, which was incredibly lucrative for them, and they needed some access. And Kennedy was failing on Cuba. He was increasing pressure on the mob, especially through Bobby Kennedy and the Get Hoffa Squad. If you remember The Irishman, if you saw that at all, you would know. But it is an interesting narrative, and I think this is kind of a little bit. It kind of takes it down a little bit. So let's take a look at what the Mob Museum has to say about that. These books, the associated television programs, and media coverage have received a great deal of attention. So much that many people treat it as an established fact that the outfit elected Kennedy. I mean, yeah, this is really kind of an interesting, and kind of goes to the psychology of conspiracy theories, I think, because what if they, what is more comforting to you as a person? Like, do you want to believe that, John F. Kennedy was elected because he saw something in the American people at a time where they needed, a light to lift, and he was just this charming guy who went really far, and he did everything the right, political way. He was American Camelot, the American royalty, all that stuff that was so prevalent around that narrative. But a lot of people, I think, the reason why this narrative, true or not, and we really never know exactly if it was true. No one can make a clear determination on that without having all the facts and the evidence and really being there. But really, what can be said about this is that it kind of just depends on how you view the government at large. Are you susceptible to believing that something like that could happen? And was it likely? And I think that probably plays in a lot of people in their either they mistrust the government and are more likely to believe a conspiracy like this, or kind of a I even hesitate to use the very loaded word conspiracy at this point, but a narrative outside of the mainstream like that. But yeah, it really is. It plays into a lot of how you view the government. So yeah, the question is, did this really happen? As the author of this John J. Binder, he wrote in his book, the Chicago outfit. Analyzing detail an article titled Organized Crime in the 1960 Presidential Election, there is no convincing evidence to support these claims about the 1960 presidential election. So he believes, John J. Binder has a kind of differing opinion here. He believes that it is not, that there was no election rigging as part of the deal. But there's definitely, clear ties. And this is a lot of really what we have when we're dealing with these big players, especially at times like these. We have ties that bind the two, or bind the various forces together, and no real convincing pieces of evidence, because that's all you can really have. Because did you know that it's possible, it was rumored that JFK and Sam Giancana, the head of the Chicago mob, shared the same mistress? That's a little suspicious. They had meetings together. They were both very interested in what was going down in Cuba. All these things, they lead to, you have to draw conclusions from the piece of evidence. They're not self-evidently conclusive. And, the conclusions you draw say a lot about, again, as I said before, who you are, how you view government, and yeah, a lot of different, I think, very interesting things about you. So let's get into it. So several authors discuss the role of the night outfit in the 1960 presidential election. The earliest statement by William Brashler in The Dawn is quite mild. He argues that Frank Sinatra, who knew Sam Giancana and John F. Kennedy, approached the Giancanas and asked for help electing Kennedy. However, the outfit's efforts were secondary to those of the Chicago Democratic Party political machine, who went all out for an Irish Catholic strongly supported by Mayor Richard Daley. So Richard Daley, again, a huge political machine in Chicago, had a lot of influence on the political outcome too. So it's fair to say that, maybe the mob had some influence in it. There was also Mayor Richard Daley. He may have been pulling some strings, maybe legal or illegal, because Richard Daley, he wasn't a choir boy himself, and that was how JFK won Illinois and then the election. So, according to Brashler, in order for the mob to work for Kennedy, only ensured a total Chicago effort of the kind that historically had been known to work miracles in the early morning hours of vote counting. In other words, the Chicago Democratic machine delivered on Election Day for John Kennedy essentially what it always did for its candidates, with the outfit-controlled wars doing little, if anything, extra. In his autobiography, Man Against the Mob, FBI agent William Romer provides a similar account of the events surrounding the 1960 election. Romer, it should be noted, had developed two high-placed informants in the outfit. He was, therefore, uniquely informed about what happened in the world. So pretty much what they're saying here, this is the basic claim, is that, yeah, maybe the mob was a little bit around, but mostly it was Daley and the Chicago machine, very, very powerful mayor at the time, Richard Daley. But there is another more grandiose narrative that, interestingly enough, appears in the book Double Cross by Sam and Chuck Giancana, the half-nephew and half-brother, respectively, of the outfit boss Sam Giancana. According to the Giancanas, Joseph Kennedy, the father of John Kennedy, struck a deal with Sam Giancana before the 1960 election. And there is something interesting to be said about this. Joe Kennedy had a big influence in the lives of his kids and getting them out there. He was always trying to hook them up with either women, sometimes the same women as himself, or big political advancements. So that does kind of track, but what he said, the deal was, I help get Jack elected, and in return, he calls off the heat. Sam Giancana is reputed to have termed the deal as, the Giancanas claim the outfit did everything possible for Kennedys in the wars they controlled. Allegedly, there was massive fraudulent voting, and hoods inside polling places made sure all ballots were cast for Kennedy by breaking the arms and legs of those who did not comply. So that sounds like a very dramatic kind of mob story that was very much, the thing about the people in the mob, I don't know if you're aware, is they're not always the most honest people. They sometimes can be a little bit over-exaggerated, a little bit over-exaggerated. So pretty much, yeah, but they went out there, they started saying, you want to vote for Kennedy? You got that? You're going to want to vote for Kennedy right here. We're going to have a little talk about it. That's that if you don't capiche. That's what they're going around doing all over Chicago. And no one really raised any eyebrows about it. So that doesn't seem that likely to me. The Kennedys, however, double-crossed Giancana and the outfit, despite Giancana supposedly meeting with Kennedy at the White House to remonstrate him. According to these authors, this caused the outfit to assassinate both John and Robert. Seymour Hersh kind of agreed, and he's, I would probably argue, a more reputable source than these two mob family members. Seymour Hersh, in a chapter in his book, The Dark Side of Camelot, also maintains that Kennedy struck a deal with the outfit. Former Chicago lawyer Robert McDonnell claims he helped arrange the meeting with Joseph Kennedy and Sam Giancana in Chicago, which curiously McDonnell saw but says didn't take place. So that is kind of the other side of the story, saying that, oh yeah, the mob were the ones that did the more the heavy lifting. And we do know, though, so there's one thing here that does track. Joseph Kennedy being involved in this does make a lot of sense, because Joseph Kennedy, as we know, he had a pretty big role in John and Bobby's life, from hooking them up with women, even sometimes the same women that he had eyes for. It was a very incestuous family. To getting them political advancements. Kennedy was really obsessed. Joseph, the older one, was quite focused on getting his kids further along the line, further up the ladder of the American elite than he ever could. And one of the ways he thought this was through utilizing the help of the Cosa Nostra, La Cosa Nostra. So McDonnell here asserts that the outfit got the vote out for Kennedy at the ward level. Gus Russo in the outfit repeats these stories told by Giancana and Hersh, claiming that scores of Giancana's vote sluggers or vote floaters hit the street to coerce the voters. So yeah, that's pretty much the other contention here, that there was some sort of political muscle, like physical muscle used, and verbal muscle, just people being intimidated at the voting booths all over Chicago. Like, no one raised an eye. And people do kind of differ and vary on the role that played, like how physical were the people, what did they say, where were they, how bad was it, how clear was it that that's what they were doing to these voters. It wasn't really quite agreed upon along many of the sources who say various stories about these events. So Russo, summarizing the election events overall, states quite strongly that outfit chieftain Tony Accardo, the mob's political point man Murray Humphreys, and other top Chicago hoodlums met in June 1960 to decide who would become the next president of the United States. A recent book by Antoinette Giancana, John Hughes, and Thomas Job repeats the extreme claims that the outfit elected Kennedy in 1960. On the other hand, Len O'Connor, the dean of Chicago's political commentators, made his remarked in his book, Clout, the power of the Daily Machine was evident throughout the city. Only the two crime syndicate wards, the 1st and the 28th, delivering a low count, fewer votes for Kennedy in 1960, in fact, than they delivered for Daley in 1955. The machine interpreted the disappointing performance as a mild rebuke by the syndicate people who had been mercilessly pounded by the presidential candidate's brother, Robert, at the McClellan Committee hearings. So what that is kind of in a reference to how in 1960 these two crime wars that were believed to be the 1st and the 28th wards in Chicago that were more under the influence of organized crime delivered less results for Kennedy than for Daley because of Bobby Kennedy's performances at the McClellan hearings, which were pretty anti-mafia. O'Connor discusses how Charlie Weber, the Democratic alderman of the 45th Ward, openly opposed the Kennedys, having been influenced by his friend Murray Humphreys to take a dim view of the Kennedys' candidacy. So that is Murray Humphreys, a point man in the mob. So there is some evidence, some suggestion to say that the mob had already been pretty suspicious of how the Kennedys would treat them once in office because of Bobby Kennedy's actions. Bobby Kennedy was a lot less charming, a lot more strict morally than John Kennedy was. Several of these accounts also discuss voting by labor union members locally or nationally. For example, in Hersh's book, Robert McDonnell alleges the outfit pressured various unions, although it's unclear whether he meant locally or nationally to support Kennedy. So that's how we get into kind of some overlap with, the Irishmen and all that stuff. And, of course, the deep links that the mob had with unions at that time. She professes to not only have witnessed Humphreys coordinating this effort with the Teamsters at the national level. This is Murray Humphreys' second wife, Jean Humphreys, but to have worked alongside him, the two Humphreys working together, Jean Humphreys and Murray Humphreys. Murray Humphreys, again, was the Chicago mob's political point man. They worked together to direct Teamster leaders from across the country And Russo alleges that the outfit through Murray Humphreys made sure that union members nationally voted Democratic. Although he quotes Mr. Humphreys' Teamsters Focus account, Russo asserts that non-Teamsters union members nationally were influenced to vote for Kennedy and places particular emphasis on these 4 states: Illinois, Michigan, Missouri, and Nevada. So, yeah, that seems to be kind of normal political behavior for a union, getting all their members to vote in one way. That's not crazy. But on the other side of the ledger, O'Connor argues that unions tied to the outfit were very displeased with Robert Kennedy and the McClellan Committee hearings, and therefore Kennedy. So that would make a lot more sense. But the question is, we know the mob was at some point displeased with Kennedy, but the question is when. People more associated with Chicago police scene, the Chicago machine scene, like the political aspect of things, the people associated with the powerful mayor, Richard Daley, said that they were a lot harsher on Kennedy earlier than what the more mob-associated sources, talking to people like Seymour Hersh, would have you believe. So that's kind of what many people are still sussing out. There's a lot of debate on this. This is by no means a settled question. O'Connor argues that, again, the unions tied to the outfit were displeased prior to the election, around the time of the McClellan Committee hearings. They were displeased with Robert and therefore John Kennedy. So the McClellan Committee hearings took place 3 years previous in 1957. Here is Jimmy Hoffa being asked a question in the McClellan Committee hearings led by Robert Kennedy. And, of course, they're all kind of revolve around his association with the mob. And we know how Jimmy Hoffa and that Irishman we felt about the Kennedys.
Mr. Hoffa tried to fix this committee staff.
I beg your pardon?
You heard it.
What'd you say?
I said you tried to fix the committee staff, and while you got off, you had no business getting off.
I don't agree with you, Senator, that I don't have a right as an American citizen to be found innocent by a jury because it don't please certain people in this country. I have a perfect right to be found innocent, I hope, as an American citizen in this country, and I shouldn't be criticized, in my opinion, for doing whatever was necessary during the course of that trial to be able to prove that I was not guilty, even though certain individuals on this committee, one individual, did his utmost to convict me of something that the jury found me innocent of.
In connection with that, Mr. Hoffa, where did you get the money that you paid to Mr. Chasty?
Excuse me, please. May I talk to my counsel, please?
Mr. Chairman, we'll not go into that.
I'm not going into the merits of the case. I just wanted to find out where he got the money. He paid him some money for a legal fee or for whatever reason he paid him.
As
I'd
Bobby.
like to find out where he got the money. We couldn't find it.
Yeah, so asking questions that, as you can tell, Jimmy Hoffa does not like to hear, and Jimmy Hoffa doesn't like to hear him. The mob doesn't like to hear him either. Yeah, so while kind of examining this more closely, the claims that appear in the books by the Giancanas, Hersh, and Russo are implausible, argues Binder here, and are based on sources who lack credibility. For example, there is not one word in any of Chicago's 4 major daily newspapers about any violence directed at voters in 1960, much less a 1920s-style wave of terror around Chicagoland. In fact, legendary crime reporter Ray Brennan, writing the day after the election, described it as sissified and bland in comparison to the violent primary of April 6, 1928. More generally, the outfit simply did not have the ability to deliver Kennedy in Chicago in a meaningful way. They just didn't have that political muscle. They were not spread out politically enough to do such a thing. According to a federal government report in 1960, the outfit controlled the Democratic Party political machinery in 5 of the 50 Chicago wards. It was the 1st, 24th, 25th, 28th, and 29th. There were 279 precincts in polling places in that ward. To effectively intimidate voters at polling places would have taken at least 4 or 5 hoods per place. So there was about 300 full members in the Chicago mob in 1960. Many of these people were in advanced age. The outfit would have been able really to, if the police did not intervene, to coerce voters essentially in only one of those 5 wards, because each ward had between 46 and 63 precincts, if you do the math. On this point, note that when Al Capone's goons helped elect the Republican slate of candidates in Cicero in 1924, he needed to bring in additional men from Dino Banian's North Side gang and others. Capone's Prohibition-era gang with 500 gunmen and its height was larger than the outfit in 1960, while Cicero was quite smaller, about 70,000. So the area they had to work there was around 70,000 people, and then by 1960 they would have to manipulate 300,000 voters. So a little bit of a difference there. Allegations that the outfit manipulated the Teamsters or other unions nationally are equally implausible. Individual Cosa Nostra families generally control local chapters of unions rather than the entire national union. Therefore, the outfit was in certainly no position to command Teamsters or other union officials from around the country to do their bidding. More importantly, Teamsters boss Jimmy Hoffa hated the Kennedys and publicly endorsed Richard Nixon, which eliminates the possibility this union influenced members to nationally vote for Kennedys. This probably leads Russo to modify Humphrey's story to one where the outfit introduced non-Teamsters unions to vote for Kennedy. So the Kennedy, anyone's ever trying to tell you that Jimmy Hoffa's Teamsters went out of their way to help Kennedy because the mob told them to, that is just not a historically accurate fact. And you could it's pretty much clear in public record that's not true. So it's also hard to believe that Joe Kennedy met with a notorious mobster who was investigated by a Senate committee his two sons were associated with. So, yeah, this personally, like, that, I would say that doesn't seem too unbelievable to me, knowing anything about Joe Kennedy. To be fair, while the idea that Joe Kennedy would meet with someone he wasn't supposed to meet with and pretty much have the press cover it up, because that is pretty much how the press operated. Not to say that the press is truth-telling fighters right now, but it was even worse back then. Like, the idea that Joe Kennedy could have met with Sam Giancana and, like, he would have taken that risk, I think it's very plausible that he would have taken a risk. But that there is the question of trust that the mobsters would have had for the Kennedys, and the fact that they would have been a horse worth backing in the political sphere, even after their kind of election results here, and their especially Bobby Kennedy's behavior in the McClellan Committee. So, in fact, Ray Brennan reported in a newspaper article just 2 days after his election that John Kennedy intended to crack down even harder on organized crime, including the outfit, as an outgrowth of activities on the McClellan Committee, and Bobby Kennedy had already labeled organized crime as the greatest danger facing the country in his book, The Enemy Within. So, pretty strong there. The details of McDonnell's story about the meeting between Joseph Kennedy and Sam Giancana are not plausible. First of all, this is what Binder is saying. First, Joe Kennedy's supposedly solicited Chicago Judge William Toohey, who in turn contracted Bob McDonnell for help in contacting Sam Giancana. But McDonnell admits he did not know Giancana. Toohey could have easily contacted the first ward Democratic politicians such as John Darko or Pat Marcy, who were close to Giancana, to effectively arrange a meeting. Secondly, McDonnell claims Toohey wanted him present at the actual meeting, yet soon as the parties were introduced, Toohey and McDonnell left the building. If McDonnell's presence was not required at the meeting itself, why was it necessary he be there at all? So, the credibility of several individuals who make these claims is also questionable. In reality, organized crime operates with a degree of secrecy identical to that used by major intelligence agencies such as the CIA or KGB. Only those who are on the absolutely need-to-know basis are informed of these particular operations. And kind of the danger of going in these stories with the mob and things with the CIA is, like, very few people are really brought into the full picture of what's going on. They don't get the full picture. So with that, I mean, it does also by that same token make it more plausible that, yeah, they wouldn't have invited him in, maybe because he was making it all up and just didn't know what was going on inside the meeting because he was never involved in the whole situation, but maybe he just wasn't high enough to be in the meeting, but was only really necessary as a middleman to kind of help set it up. This McDonnell here. So the credibility of these, again, several individuals are a little questionable. This is what Binder is saying. So the average soldier, the lowest rung that you can be a full member in of the outfit, would not have known the information the Giancana's claim to known, much less Chuck Giancana, who at best would have been a lowly mob associate. Moreover, the Giancana's book is not taken seriously by well-informed students of the Chicago outfit. In it, the authors claim Sam Giancana was involved in every major event related to organized crime in Chicago that occurred from his adolescent years onward, although many of the assertions are contrary to the known facts or are unsupported by evidence. Because, yeah, it can be tempting again to tie these narratives just let one big string on the corkboard that like makes everything come full circle, but that's not always the case. Robert McDonnell also has some things with credibility against him. A disbarred attorney who was a compulsive drinker, gambler, and was also, but probably definitely someone who had a character pattern and background that would make him kind of an ideal mob associate, someone who would have been maybe manipulated by the mob because they would have been in debt. In fact, McDonnell borrowed heavily from loan shark Sam DiStefano, a mob's associate, to support his gambling habit. When he was unable to pay his debts, DiStefano put McDonnell to work for him, including allegedly, see this account on Captive City by Ovid Damaris, having him carry 2 dead bodies from his basement. It is extremely unlikely that someone as unstable and unreliable as McDonnell would have been involved by the outfit in a supposed undertaking of this magnitude and with the information this secretive and sensitive. Furthermore, it's difficult to find informed, unbiased individuals who place any faith in the statements by Robert McDonnell. More generally, retired police officers who specialize in organized crime, including former members of the Chicago Police Department's elite intelligence unit, scoff at the notion that non-mobster relatives or peripheral associates of gangsters would have any information about the outfit that's not publicly available, such as newspaper articles. I mean, to be fair, though, if there are families, their family members, things could have happened, but, there is such a strong level of secrecy within the mob. It is kind of hard to say that without much confidence. It is also worth noting that in the years after 1968, when both Kennedy and his brother Robert were still revered in the public as martyrs, it also kind of became open season on the Kennedy family. Nothing sold faster, at least in book terms in recent years, than juicy allegations, whether they were supported by convincing evidence or not, concerning members of the Kennedy clan, the mob, the Rat Pack, and Marilyn Monroe, and all those people. Such is the world we live in which readers need to examine the latest or the most frequently repeated sensational claims before giving them any credibility. So there is a certain aspect of this that would probably be a little bit, outside the idea. Like, I personally do not believe that Sam Giancana's boys were going around Chicago beating everybody up. But there are, again, to conclude here, there are no doubt indisputable links that we have between the Kennedys and mobsters and the relationship. And we do understand that there are definitely links between the mob and the Kennedys, as there were between the mobs really and various political outfits. But in the end, it does seem that for the large part, there just wouldn't have been the same incentive. There wouldn't have been the same need for the Kennedys, or for the mob to help the Kennedys, because of the fact that in the McClellan Commission, there was already, a lot of animosity that had been built up against Bobby Kennedy, and by extension, the Kennedys as a whole, because of Bobby Kennedy's aggressive questioning of Jimmy Hoffa and his ties and association with the mob. So that kind of built, even though, the Teamsters didn't, the mob and the Teamsters, it's all very disputed how much control they had nationally, when they had it, and what they were able to do with it. That's all very much disputed. And we'll dive into it more, for sure, in future episodes of this season, because it is a kind of very interesting time where there's a lot of stories in that period, the kind of 50s, 60s, 70s Cold War period, that aren't really often told. And that is definitely something worth diving into. Hope you helped and enjoyed our little effort today to uncover one more piece of hidden history. Join us next week, where we try it again.